Figure out what your value is and know what's important to you and also know what value you have to give. I think expecting something just because you want it or feel like you deserve it is going to lead you down the wrong path. I think if you earn it and work hard at it, then you're going to show up with confidence because you know the value that you have in the room. And if others don't see it, that's okay. But don't let it diminish you. Just know your worth, and whoever is attracted to your light will come. And those that don't let it, dim your light.
Welcome to Women and Work, the show where we take an inside look at how women are overcoming our own unique challenges as we grow our careers, build a business, and nurture relationships and family. I'm Diane Mocha, founder and CEO of MomSub, the childcare app that connects you to a substitute mom. And I want you to know that work can fit your life. Our guests show you the way they've done it. Today, I'm with Holli Beth Clauser, who founded ABA Cares. Her business trains recruiters looking for therapists who are skilled in applied behavior analysis, which is used in supporting individuals with autism and developmental disorders. Holli's goal is to help those recruiters improve hiring outcomes and retention. And Holli identifies herself as actually autistic in her LinkedIn profile. We're so happy you're joining us, Holli.
Thank you, Diana. I appreciate you having me on, and I look forward to the conversation.
Sounds great. Let's jump right into it. I want to know what the biggest challenge you think you faced as a woman in your career.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge that I faced was being a single mom, quite honestly, early on, and the timing of when my career could launch, if you will. And so I had to delay certain taking on certain positions, and had to really work around childcare, had to work around the needs of my children, had to really put being a mom first for the majority of my early start of my career.
hmm So, when you went to school, did you know this was the career you wanted to pursue? And did you start working in it first before you became a mom?
Yeah, not at all. Actually, being a mom led me to my career. And so I was taking my children to an integrated preschool at the time, and the director there said, "You're really great with these children who have autism. Would love it if you could provide some therapy if you're looking for, a job." And at the time, I could take on some more hours, but had never worked in that industry prior, and so was a little bit nervous. However, it kept me close to my children. It provided the same hours that they were going to preschool that were, available. And so I gave it a shot, and I knew right away that the field of supporting individuals who are autistic was the path for me, but I would not have ever found it had I not had children myself.
Wow, that's heartwarming, how one thing leads to another. When you said an integrated school, you mean integrated between children on the spectrum and those who weren't?
Exactly. Yes.
Okay. And so your children were preschool at that point?
Yeah, my daughter was actually 1. She had just turned 1, and my son then would have been 3. So they were early, young
And
children.
and they were both diagnosed at a young age?
No, actually, like myself, they were diagnosed later. Both my children were misdiagnosed with different things as children. My daughter at the time, actually, in my interview, she has spina bifida occulta, and in the interview, I actually had to bring her post surgery. She was still a little bit out of it, but they were very welcoming with me bringing her as well, which worked out because being a mother with special needs children, you need to work somewhere that's flexible. And just even going to the interview and them allowing me to bring my daughter was a great sign that it would be a great organization to work for. So they have different diagnoses. At the time, my daughter's was mostly medical, and my son's was mostly behavioral.
Okay. So what drew you to this integrated school if you didn't necessarily consider your children on the spectrum, and what was the career you were doing at the time?
Really interesting question. So I have always been drawn to making sure that my children were going to be exposed to to everybody early on and making sure that they were going to be accepting. And so I was drawn to the preschool because it seemed like a really understanding environment. And with my daughter having spina bifida at 1, I didn't know if she was ever going to talk or if she was going to walk. And so she might have ended up needing some of those supports later on. And so I thought it was a good opportunity to put them in a school that was accepting. At the time, I was actually working in a theater. And so my interest was more working in improv, doing some behind the scenes stuff. So I was still kind of searching for my career path and having some fun while doing it. So yeah, so that's where I was at the stage when I found autism care.
So had you gone to college at that point?
No, actually, so I still have not graduated. Being a young single mom of 2 children, I attempted to go back, and it just wasn't in the cards for me. So I've been lucky enough to use my knowledge and my skill set that I've built in my career to to become a business owner, actually. And so I really just invested in in being self-taught and attending a lot of conferences and being mentored by really brilliant people. And so, luckily, what I do, I don't need to have a degree to do it. But again, would never have found this path had I not had my children.
And that's interesting because when I hear something that's very official sounding, like applied behavioral analysis, I would think that's something that you have to have a degree, maybe even a master's. You have to be a therapist or a psychologist, and so that's not the case. So, what kind of careers are there open, and is this something that a lot of women are drawn to because it's a nurturing type of career?
Yeah, you nailed it. It is. There's mostly women, a lot of men as well in the space. It's actually how I met my husband. But to answer your questions, in terms of what stage so what like where you can enter would be an entry level like I got into at first was teacher aide. Now they have what's called a registered behavior technician. Depending on the insurance funding, you might need a bachelor's, but most often in the United States you don't. And so you do get some training. There is a certificate program. There are some things in place to make sure that the individuals providing care understand the science and know how to use it. But with this being a young industry, what's really cool is that there's a lot of different pathways you can take. So if you enter in as, potentially a behavior technician, you can grow and get your master's and then get your master's, even have a doctorate in applied behavior analysis, or you can go the route I did, which was becoming a trainer. So I trained individuals to become registered behavior technicians. And then I got into recruiting, and then that led me using the science of ABA actually to perfect my hiring skills and reduce retention. There's other admin positions as well. So it's a young industry that offers a lot of paths if you're able to explore and figure out where your skill sets are. We can kind of take you there because it's such a young industry.
Mhm. When people refer to paraprofessionals, is that part of that industry as well? Which is a common term I've heard for people who work in schools.
Yeah, it's a parallel, I would say. So individuals who are a paraprofessional or work as an instructional, coach or aide in a school, what we do is outside of the school. Sometimes it's self-funded or mostly it's insurance funded. So it's more in the healthcare space than it is in the educational space. Actually, we don't focus on educational. We focus on helping individuals so that they can work well or succeed in an educational setting, but that's not our primary goal. Is more like life skills, communication, things like that. But it would be a great parallel to if you're looking to get out of working in a school and want to grow your career. ABA is a wonderful choice.
And did you know when you had children you were autistic?
I did not, but I was not surprised to find out. I did not talk until I was 7, where it was understandable. I had my own language, so to speak, and I had a family that understood what my needs were, but I couldn't communicate to the general public where I can have my needs met or where they can understand what I was trying to say. And so I would have been my own student back then, but we don't have to talk about my age, but I'm coming up on a half a century. And so we did not know. And I started to recognize some more deficits and pain points as I had my children, being able to be able to keep myself organized, like with executive functioning skills, some different communications that were needed that I didn't need, when I was not a parent, scheduling, figuring out health, childcare, all of that became a challenge. And so I wasn't surprised when I got the diagnoses for myself or my children, to be honest with you, but I was not diagnosed at that time. I just thought maybe it was my ADHD or, other things that I had a diagnosis for.
So you talk about this wonderful, serendipity where you're taking your kids to this school, you realize you have this knack for helping these kids, they offer you a job, it all sounds so great, but nothing in life is unicorns and rainbows, right?
Yeah.
So tell me, what are some of the challenges you faced and how did you overcome those?
Yeah, the first couple years were really difficult. My daughter, like I mentioned, she has spina bifida occulta, so many surgeries and needing to take off work, and that doesn't work out in every organization. So I did find myself often out of a job, or quite honestly, sometimes just not even earning enough to really live off. I think there was one year I remember I made $7,000, and that's because for the entire year, if you can imagine. And that was really because of the amount of time I had to take off because my daughter was in the hospital. There was times after her surgery that she had to remain in the hospital. And so, and as I mentioned, I was a single mom. I did have some support for the first 5 years of her life, but really wasn't able to grow my career until actually I remarried, and then I was able to have some more support, and that worked out for me. But I always stayed in autism care, where I provided, where I was able to find a school that was understanding of me being out, and so I was there for 7 years, and so I had to remain in the school district even though I knew ABA was somewhere that I always wanted to go. I really had to make sure that the timing lined up for me, knowing that autism care is so important with consistency. So for me, it just took a bit to land the right schedule.
Mhm. How did you survive during those years? Were you getting resources, in the community, aid to families? Did you have your own family that was helping? Did you ever fear you would end up in a shelter?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there was times where it would be myself and my two kids, and we would be at the food bank. Absolutely. There was times where I'd be in the emergency room with my son, who's beating the security guard because he doesn't understand what's happening with my daughter, who's getting treatment, and I don't have anybody else to watch them, and so or to watch him at the time. And so there was definitely a lot of leaning on government support. There was a lot of leaning on friends and individuals that could help me from the emotional side. And I had family that I never really feared being in a shelter. I knew that if I had to, I could stay with them. But it never got to that point. Luckily I did have my grandmother at the time. She was really helping me with like half my rent for a couple of years. So it definitely took some time to feel secure, and it was a challenge, but I really loved what I did, and it worked out again time wise. We had summers off. I mean, I did a lot of providing care to my students outside of that. Worked in a really affluent area, so leaned in a lot on second jobs providing care, where I was able to take my autistic students everywhere I went with my own children. So oftentimes I was more than a parent of two. I was a parent of three or four, because I would often just, kind of bring them along everywhere I went.
Mhm. And so did you see a vision for your future? Did you think, "I wanna start a business doing that?" How did that come about? Because just when you got stable, you
Yeah.
start a business, and that's complete instability, right?
Yeah, I guess, it's funny. My husband says I always like to cook something new when we're going to a party. I never cook what I know. And I think that it's kind of where I thrive. I do really well in crisis. I get laser focused. So it's advice I would give now to, like, younger me is be intentional about your career and have a vision. And while it worked out for me that I didn't, I think that it may have worked out even better had I done that. And so the reason why I opened up my business actually was because I saw that retention was a problem. And I know as an autistic that I get very attached to people. And I can imagine that the families and the individuals we work with do as well. And I picture, a non-vocal autistic who can't understand why they're not having the same therapist show up, or a family that's like, why are people constantly leaving me? Like, what's wrong with my kids? Or how can I get some help? And just the ripple effect that retention has also on employees and their worth and feeling like they're making an impact. So I kind of felt called to this where there was no choice. So there are hardships, but as you just discovered, I faced hardships before. So my why and my mission really drives me to continue in this owning this business.
Hmm. So you want to help recruiters reach out to people who may not have even considered this job and this industry like you, but may have a knack for it, and then give them the tools and the organizations the tools so that they're not only excited, but retain that and stay. And how do you do that? Why is there this high turnover, and what can you do to combat it?
A lot of it is just not being intentional or having the wrong intentions. And so, oftentimes, when I go into an organization or I listen to recruiters, they're just selling and they're not educating, they're not being intentional in the conversation. And so, because I think of my path and I know that the people I'm recruiting are real people who have families, or, are an individual that would be affected if this didn't work out. And then I also know on the opposite side who's getting the cure and how they'd be affected. My style of recruiting and the way that I train is to make sure that we are making a match that is a good match. So understanding the holes, if you will, or deficits of both the company and the individual that we're speaking with, understanding the strengths and the skills, and then matching that accordingly, and at least saying, this is what it is. And we're going to lay it out there. If it's a great fit for you, perfect. If it's not, that's okay too. Let me give you some career guidance on what might be. So really being the person that I wish I had, way back when, in order to help. And then also using the science of ABA and looking at our weighting scores that we're doing in our interviews that I've built out, looking at indicators to have 360 feedback to the recruiters to make sure that they're improving and not just accepting, yep, you know what, it's a turnover, or, I hired somebody and they left, no big deal. We can always hire more. And we need to change that. We really need to care who's in front of these individuals at the time that they're with us. And so, yeah, the turnover really is a problem because people have sort of accepted it as status quo and have more of an outlook of, if we could just hire faster than they leave, we're good. And I don't accept that. I think that we can do the hard work and can do better. And so that's what I offer.
Is it a lower paying field compared to other therapy fields, and does that play into it?
It's a great question. For the entry level staff, frontline staff, oftentimes it is, I would say, equivalent to an entry at potentially Target, or, maybe a little bit more. I would say it's comparable to paraprofessional pay, but it has the career paths which help. I think that's an area that we could definitely improve. But again, for the insurance funding, sometimes, hands are tied. Uh, and it's a hard job. I mean, it's a job that's physical, it's a job that's emotional, but it's a rewarding job. I mean, I did the job for 14 years, even being a single parent with two kids with special needs. I still love that job and I miss it. I can't do it right now physically. So I do this. Um, but it's a job that I would go back to in a heartbeat and don't regret ever taking, even though the pay wasn't exactly, stellar. It was workable. But then if you advance into training, you advance into recruiting, you advance into becoming a BCBA, that there is better pay. So I would say BCBAs right now are getting paid more than teachers. They're getting paid, some of them are getting paid, at the same salary that you would see a physician get paid, or sometimes even a surgeon. So there is advancement in pay in the field, but starting off, it's definitely, I would say, entry level.
And what's a BCBA and what do they need to have in their background to qualify?
Thanks for asking. Yeah, it's a board certified behavior analyst, and they need to have need to have a bachelor's in really anything, but then they go for their master's degree, and then there's, I think it's 22,000, it might be 25,000 now, hours of work towards getting their practicum hours. So kind of thinking of like a student teacher, or think about nursing. So there's some hours that go along with that, and then they have to pass an exam in order to become a board certified behavior analyst, is with the BACB, which is, don't ask me what that acronym is. It's not in front of me, but it's an association. And they're governed by that. In some states, they also have to get their license, their LBA, and be able to be licensed in the state to treat as well.
Wow. Okay. So 14 years as an ABA therapist. You loved it. And then you said you couldn't do it physically anymore. What happened?
Yeah, so I have fibromyalgia. Um, I also just physically couldn't keep where I felt comfortable keeping the kids safe. Oftentimes the ones that I work really well with, and saw the like significant impact, they run a lot, and so I felt that maybe it was time to back off, just to make sure that they were able to be with a therapist that could keep up with them, and prevent any potential harm. And so I started to recognize, it never got to that point, but I started to recognize the opportunity or the chance of that happening. And so luckily I was able to transition into a training position and then recruiting position. So it was fine, but my heart is still in the direct one-on-one therapy.
Hmm. And so, what made you decide to go from that training and recruiting position to your own business?
And
Was
yeah.
it a schedule thing, a money thing? Was it something that, now that you had this support, like you said, at home, being married, that it was easier to kind of leap off the cliff?
Oh, I found myself back in hardship, actually. So I lost my job, and my husband did as well. We can't really go into 100%, but it wasn't a fair situation. And it was something that should have been avoided had the company that we were working at properly taken care of us. And so what I recognized was, oh gosh, like here I am in an untrusting world, again, in a place of instability, in a place where I felt like my voice wasn't heard. And it just really inspired me to take a risk and start a podcast, start a conference, and start my own company, in the face of adversity. Um, and so we took a risk. We did not have a nest egg, nothing. There was, the risk again of, being back to where I was so long ago, and super scary. But I was mission driven. And so we decided that we were going to go all in and try to help the workforce. So while of course my why is the families, it's also the employees, and making sure that the organizations know how to retain. And part of that is knowing the law. Part of that is knowing how to care for others, how to write policies that are taking care of others. And so, not only do I help with recruiting, but I also do consulting as well on the HR side. And so, yeah, that it was really mission driven and still is. So, yeah.
Okay. And you had those connections in the field, and it sounds like you really wanted that idea of having your own destiny in your hands, because when you relied on others, there was nothing that's for sure. It sounds like you did it together with your husband, and at that point, your kids were grown, perhaps, or teenagers.
Yep. So they are grown. At the time, they were just graduating high school, but it was definitely a time where hanging out with mom was not a thing. So my business became my baby in a way. I was thinking about that actually yesterday on a walk. Is that the need, and the priorities kind of shifted to the company being a baby, but I have to still obviously make time for my grown children.
Hmm. And when you look back, what tip or hack would you share with parents who are in the thick of it now, trying to juggle career and kids? I mean, you really had challenges with the special needs children and surgeries, but what was something that really helped you make a shift in not feeling just constantly overwhelmed and overworked and I can't take it anymore kind of feeling?
Yeah, I think it's a complex question and a complex answer. I think the biggest thing that I learned, when I was single, but before I met my partner, we I I didn't really make time for myself. All my decisions were made around my children, and I don't regret that. However, what I've learned is to add to that. Yes, all decisions, you should be thinking about your family and your children, and on top of that, it's okay if sometimes yourself and your work, your social life is put first and they see that. It's a gift for them to be able to recognize, okay, mom is taking care of herself too, or mom is doing this for us. And to see that hard work, I think in the very beginning, I try to shield that from them a lot. I didn't want them to know. Like, if you talk to them now, they had no idea we were poor. They had no idea the struggles at all. And so I really shield them from that, but I think it's okay for them to see you struggle, and I've definitely allowed them to see the struggle of an entrepreneur, and have shared that with them. And so I think just don't put yourself aside, and know that you can do both. You can do and sometimes it changes. So be okay with the fact that you might be going through a season where it seems like you're giving more to one thing versus another, and just know that that's all it is seasons, and it's going to change. And know that being intentional in what your goals are, you'll be able to balance that better. And I think, again, just taking the time to be intentional. I know it's hard. Trust me, I know it's hard to find the space, but even if you can start a self-fulfilling prophecy journal, which I just started recently, which every day I'm like, what is it that I want to accomplish? What do I want to see? And knowing that whatever I put into the world is likely going to come. And so just being intentional on that.
Using visualization, manifestation, very popular right now. It's interesting that you say you shielded your kids from the struggle because while I didn't put a burden on them, we went through hardship in our family and I didn't shield them. I mean, we openly talked, you know. I grew up in a household where everyone sort of, not just talked, but yelled things out. And so we did the same. And so now, my kids have a bit of resentment because they did feel, especially because that they were a little different maybe than their friends because we were in a community where they went to these amazing schools, but the community we were from, the families were not as financially wealthy as the for the other community, and so there was this comparison, and so there was this feeling of why did we have to go through this, and so there's no right or wrong obviously,
No,
but it's good to know when you look back, that you see the disadvantages of having shield them, and I see the disadvantages of having shared, and so and every family is different, but it's good to know how different people dealt with it and reacted to it. And one more thing I want to cover before we go is this idea of you being a woman in this field, because as you said in the beginning, there are a lot of women in this field. Women go into nurturing fields. It's my impression, and maybe I'm wrong, that boys are more often diagnosed than girls on the spectrum, correct? So
that is
your
correct.
so your clients, the people, the children you're helping are more often boys, and of course it's common in the school system that teachers are more often women and the classrooms are split generally half and half. But, what kind of challenges do you think that exist in the field because there's so many women, where most people would think, oh, we're going to be very supported like you are. Everyone's going to understand this idea of I'm a woman and I'm a mom and I have kids, and we want to nurture these boys, but then sometimes, boys need male role models. So what is the dynamic of being a woman in this field and in your career and even now as a business owner that you had to navigate that maybe would have been different if you were a man?
It's interesting. I really don't spend too much time on that, and I know it is a factor. I'm actually a group that is a leadership for women, and so we do talk about that. Um, but for me, I think because my struggle has always been communication, I continue to focus on that, and so I think that that for me, making sure that I'm clearly defining things to individuals and having them understand the story and the mission is more of a barrier. And I think it would potentially be the same whether I'm a man or a woman. I think the thing I overcome the most is just being autistic and my own limitations in comfort in speaking or uh, getting my word out there, I guess, so to speak, even though others might tell you that I'm influential in LinkedIn in the space, micro maybe. But it still is very, draining. And so I think that potentially being a man could have opened up doors, but I don't really know. I don't really know if that's true or not. So it's hard for me to live in the abstract like that. I just can kind of know what's the reality for me in front of people. And so I tried not to look at the gender like that, but I know it's important. But that's kind of just the way that I look is uh more I guess the merit in front of me and try not to see the challenges. I guess that would be make sense, right? As I've been through so many challenges in my life that if I try to focus on what the barriers are, it becomes larger for me to overcome. And so I try to focus on what do I have and how can I elevate the things that I am and that work for me instead of looking at what I can't change. I'm not sure if that was a helpful answer
Oh,
or not, but
I understand. A lot of organizations that have primarily women in these nurturing roles and in entry level roles and maybe middle management roles oftentimes have men in the top roles in the executive suites and the decision making roles, sort of the ones deciding, the direction and the finances. And I don't know if that's true in this space or if you find that women are the ones sort of running the whole thing in general, in
that's a
terms
great
of
question.
numbers. Yeah.
No, they are, but I will tell you, I actually do really I actually am this is gonna sound a little wrong. I do really well in male rooms that are high intense. So I I don't know, it's very easy to see what motivates them. And so if they're motivated by the outcomes, the money, the things like that. I can use their motivation then to speak their language to get my point across. So it's a little bit easier for me as an autistic to read a man, if I'm just being 100% honest, than it is for me to necessarily read a woman who's also trying to care for me, like is a little bit more sensitive to me and trying to nurture. And so I have to try to figure out and navigate. And so I think I'm sometimes more effective in a room that is potentially an imbalance of power. Like I enjoy an imbalance of power because it's so clear to me on how to overcome that. Um, I don't typically talk about that kind of stuff because it can be misconstrued or misunderstood. I think that everybody deserves to be in the right seat, whether they're a man or a woman. And so, in the conversations that I have that are like you said, like maybe an imbalance because there are mostly the CEOs are mostly men, the owners are mostly men, the CFOs most certainly are mostly men. And I think because my dad was a CFO and also a very um, challenging man. And as my mom says, I was the only child in the house that felt comfortable pushing back. So I've always just been doesn't matter to me that you are of this status or this gender. Like if I have something to say, I'm gonna say it. So I feel comfortable in those rooms.
Hmm.
I'd like to see it change, of course, and get the
Oh,
right
sure.
people in. But yeah,
And like you said, the right people being in the right seat, regardless of gender, not just for the sake of it. I
exactly.
wonder
Yeah.
what you would share with women in the workplace who are autistic and feel that they have an extra struggle because of that. What do you tell them? What did you tell your kids growing up to prepare them for their future?
Figure out what your value is and know what's important to you and also know what value you have to give. I think expecting something just because you want it or feel like you deserve it is going to lead you down the wrong path. I think if you earn it and work hard at it, then you're going to show up with confidence because you know the value that you have in the room, and if others don't see it, that's okay, but don't let it diminish you. Just know your worth, and whoever is attracted to your light will come, and those that don't let it, dim your light, because at the end of the day, they're going to go on with their life not even knowing they affected you. So figure out who you are, see yourself for what you are, and be proud of that. And so just pay attention to your own gifts and don't worry as much as you can. Don't worry about others. There's going to be really bad people out there. I've shared that, I think in the story about talking about losing my job, like those were not good characters in the life story of mine. And for a little bit, it did cause me to go into depression. It did make me really kind of doubt everything. And then I thought, you know what, this isn't my story. And I'm gonna use my voice and understand who I am and go out there and try again. And
Yes, and beautiful words that you're sharing. Thank you so much for sharing that on today's episode of Women in Work. And if you were inspired by today's story, remember to share it with a friend, leave a review, and subscribe so you can meet our next amazing guest. If you want to invest in a solution to the childcare crisis, check out MomSub's equity crowdfunding campaign at momsub.com/invest. That's MomSub, like a substitute mom, or you can connect with MomSub on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and our other social media. Remember, your career, your choices, and your success are yours to define. So keep pushing boundaries and spreading your love and encouragement to other women who need it.